Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome to my Premier League Match Week 6 predictions, where just like Scott Parker in terms of the unemployment line, we're going to be jumping straight into things. I'm sorry Scott, that was probably slightly uncalled for, but jumping into Premier League Match Week 6, we start off with the Merseyside derby, Everton versus Liverpool. Now I do have to admit that before talking about either of these two teams that I do have a strong favourite, and I probably do think I have to go with that favourite, as I do think Liverpool will win this one 2-0. I mean, obviously looking at Liverpool, although they didn't have the strongest of starts this season, they have won their last 2 games, and I do think that confidence will carry over, especially versus an Everton team that haven't won a single game yet. Once again, no disrespect to this Everton team, I think they brought in some great players this transfer window, obviously in defence with Tarkowski and Cody, in the midfield with Idrissa Gueye returning, along with James Gardner, and obviously up front in attack to have the likes of Neil Maupay until Calvert-Lewin comes back. I think Everton have built themselves a really solid spine this transfer window, but once again versus this Liverpool team, they could turn absolutely anyone spineless on their day. Once again, it depends whether Jurgen Klopp does his best Snoop Dogg impression, and it all depends on the grass quality on the day, but I do think Liverpool should have no excuse but to win this one. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, before we jump into game number 2, let me remind you to put your predictions in the comment section down below. Obviously it was Manish who had the most accurate predictions last week with 6 out of 10 predictions correct, so of course don't forget to put your predictions down below, and you want to be just like Wayne Rooney in an old age home and hopefully get lucky.
What's wrong with you?
So of course don't forget to put your predictions down below. But of course, jumping into game number 2, we have Brentford versus Leeds United. Now I will say this, although Leeds United got away with the draw versus Everton, I would almost argue that they were the better team versus Everton. They dominated a large part of that game. If it wasn't for Rodrigo going off with a shoulder injury, I do think that they probably would have won that game. Once again, it didn't seem like too serious of an injury, so I think he will be ready for a game like this. Obviously looking at Brentford, once again getting that 4-0 win earlier this season versus Man United.
I prefer really not to speak.
But obviously looking at Brentford, other than that, although they've gotten some very valuable points here and there, I do think Leeds United just edged in my opinion. Nothing bad versus Brentford. I do think it will be a game with a lot of goals in it, and I do think that it will be a 3-2 win. Once again, it could be very entertaining and go either way. Jumping into game number 3, we have Chelsea versus West Ham United. Now once again, I think looking at Chelsea, a lot of eyes are going to be on the fact that Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is now in the club, along with Fofana as well. It also looks like Zakaria as well. Once again, Chelsea have brought in some really decent options. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it is definitely much needed. Obviously, Thomas Tuchel talking about the team being too soft, unlike Wayne Rooney at an old age home. Okay, I'm sorry, I promise that's the last time I'll make that joke.
You are a liar!
But looking at Chelsea, I definitely think that they should beat West Ham in a game like this, although saying West Ham, they've got the ability to turn on at really weird times, just like Wayne Rooney in an old age home. Okay.
We're all disappointed.
Okay, I'm sorry, but looking at West Ham United, I do unfortunately feel like they're not quite hitting it at the moment. They did get a draw versus Tottenham Hotspurs, which was huge, and in their defense, I thought on the attacking front that they actually seemed fierce and fiery in that game. They actually stepped up a level. I'm not sure what David Moyes did, but once again, if he improves like that, I think we could see a result versus Chelsea. But once again, I just haven't seen enough from West Ham at the moment. I do feel like this game could go either way, but I am just going to go with a 2-1 win in Chelsea's favour. Once again, not because Chelsea have been brilliant, obviously they've just lost to Southampton, but I think having a proper number 9 up front, although aging, I think Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, if he starts in this Chelsea team, he will make a major difference. Now moving on to our next game, we have Newcastle United versus Crystal Palace. Now, unlike the graphic for the software I used to make my predictions, Newcastle United did show up on the day versus Liverpool. Obviously, looking at Alexander Isak, he seems to be the perfect striker fit for Newcastle United, and dare I say, he could be the player to take Newcastle United to, dare I say, a European spot in the future. Once again, an absolutely brilliant debut for him. He scored a goal and got one offside goal, unfortunately, but once again, an absolutely brilliant display from him. And I'm a tiny bit surprised to see Newcastle United with only 1 win so far this season. Once again, they're going to have to start converting more, much like Crystal Palace. Once again, another team that I think is really good, but yet doesn't always show it in terms of results. I feel like this game could be very close between these two teams, and because of that, once again, waiting for Newcastle United United to turn draws into wins, I'm going to put forward a 2-2 draw. In fact, I'm very tempted to put forward a 2-1 win in Newcastle United's favour, because although Wilfried Zaha has been brilliant, 4 goals in 4 games for him, who would have thought, I do think Newcastle United, with Alexander Isak, the display he had versus Liverpool, I do think Newcastle United could take it. Now moving on to our next game, we have Nottingham Forest versus Bournemouth. Now, I mean, looking at Nottingham Forest, they signed 21 players this transfer window.
Say what now?
I mean, 21 players. They should have no excuse but to beat Bournemouth. Obviously, looking at Bournemouth, getting rid of Scott Parker a few days ago, obviously huge for them. But ever since then, they've drawn to Wolverhampton Wanderers. So you know what, there could be an argument here. Maybe they'll do better without Scott Parker. Although saying this is a very weak Wolves team at the moment. I do think that this has potential to be a very close game. Obviously, looking at Bournemouth, they've won their last 3 games versus Nottingham Forest. Obviously, they would be the favourites here in terms of those kinds of results. But at the end of the day, Nottingham Forest, they've brought in some brilliant players. They've been very unlucky with some of their fixtures lately. I mean, obviously, previous game, losing 6-0 to Man City. With this current Man City team, with especially Erling Haaland up front, I feel like I could almost excuse them. I do feel like Forest are going to win this one. And I'm just going to put forward a 2-1 win. I did see some promising moments from Bournemouth. Moving on to our next game, we have Tottenham Hotspurs versus Fulham. Now, once again, looking at Tottenham Hotspurs, it wasn't their best game versus West Ham United last time. I feel like they did a lot more defending because West Ham United seemed to switch on. But as we know on the attacking front, Tottenham Hotspurs can be a real threat to deal with. Obviously unbeaten at the moment versus a Fulham team that have only lost 1 game this season. Once again, as we know, Fulham, they've got the ability to switch on. They look very, very strong this season. I do, funnily enough, think that they will avoid relegation, but will they avoid a loss versus Tottenham Hotspurs? Once again, it's going to be a game that I think could be tremendously close, but I do think Tottenham Hotspurs will just take this one with, dare I say, a 2-1 win. I think it's very likely that Alexander Mitrovic will score another goal, but once again, looking at Spurs in their current form, I wouldn't be surprised if they got a very strong win here. Moving on to our next game, we have Wolves versus Southampton. Now looking at Wolverhampton Wanderers, 0 wins so far this season, and it comes as no surprise in my opinion. I mean, getting rid of your 4 best defensive players. I mean, you got rid of Connor Cody, Saiz, Dendonka, I think there was one more as well. I think it was Willy Bolly as well. Once again, Wolves getting rid of your 4 best defensive players and then asked what happened. Once again, looking at Wolves, I don't think you stand a chance versus Southampton. And once again, looking at Southampton and the quality they have in their team, Wolves should have had a team that could compete with them. But once again, looking at Southampton, they've been brilliant in terms of form. They were brilliant versus Man United. They got a win versus Chelsea. So I think that they should be able to dominate this Wolves team. I mean, obviously looking at Wolves, ever since Jimenez got injured, obviously they've struggled in terms of their attack. And obviously their defense was their only redeeming factor. So to get rid of your best defenders, it is not a smart move. I do think Southampton should take this one. They have been brilliant as of late. Now moving on to what I believe is our second or third last game, we have Aston Villa versus Man City. Now, I mean, no offense to Aston Villa, but they haven't been great this season. Obviously conceding 7 goals in their first 5 games, obviously only 1 win, 4 losses. As I said, I mean, to concede 7 goals in your first 5 games, you could make an excuse for it, but to go against a team where their striker has scored 9 and 5, once again, I think it leaves very, very little chance. I do think Aston Villa had their moments versus Arsenal in their previous game, but once again, going up against this Man City team, I mean, I almost feel like a 4-0 win is semi-generous.
What do you mean by that?
Once again, nothing bad against Aston Villa, but this Man City team seems to be on a whole new level. I mean, looking at a player like Erling Haaland, he's about a third to a quarter of the way to beating the all-time Premier League goal-scoring record, and we're only a month into the season. I mean, 2 hat-tricks in your first 5 games. This man is going to be an absolute monster, and I want you guys to put down in the comment section down below how many goals you think Haaland will score this season. I mean, at this rate, he's gotten, 2 goals a game kind of ratio? I mean, he could end the season with over 70 goals at this rate. That is scary. Obviously, he will have a different form, but versus Aston Villa, he might even get another hat-trick. Now moving on to our second last game, we have Brighton versus Leicester City. Now obviously looking at Brighton, they did lose their previous game, their first loss of the season, so they've had really good form at the moment. Weirdly enough, it's the first game that they haven't had Neil Maupay there obviously, since they've sold him to Everton, but I do think looking at this Brighton team, they have a lot of promise. I think defensively they've got a very solid team. They've just brought in Billy Gilmore into their midfield, but my one problem for them is the fact that I don't believe they've got a proper number 9 up front. Yes, they've got Danny Welbeck, but I wouldn't consider him one of the best number 9s in the Premier League, and obviously they've got the likes of Trossard, who may be able to fit into that position. Only time will tell, but looking versus Leicester City, I think Brighton stand a serious chance. I mean, Leicester, 4 losses, 1 draw. I have no idea what happened to you. Well, I mean, I say that, but you sold Fofana and Schmeichel and you haven't gotten proper replacements. Once again, Leicester City, you could be in a lot of trouble this season, and if you don't fix something soon, you could get relegated. Currently 20th place in the Premier League. I mean, you guys are under a team that lost 9-0 to Liverpool.
Man there trying to stop Drogba getting himself into further trouble.
Once again, something has to be fixed, but I do think Brighton, weirdly enough, are the favourites here, and they could get a 2-1 win. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to our final game of this Premier League match week, Man United versus Arsenal. Now, of course, looking at Man United, they finally seem to have picked up some form. Obviously, defensively look very solid, and attacking-wise, they had a very, very good game versus Leicester City. Once again, it's not that hard when they've kind of weakened their defense. And versus Arsenal, who I would say is the strongest team in terms of form at the moment. Once again, it is not going to be an easy game. As you know, between these two teams, it is always a very entertaining watch in terms of the history. Obviously, 3 wins for United, 3 draws, and 4 for Arsenal. It is always a very, very entertaining contest. And although Arsenal has obviously conceded less goals this season, has scored way more goals, I do think this could be a very close game. And although United didn't have as strong of a start, I think this could go down as a 2-2 draw. Now, no, that's not me being Manchester United biased, but obviously, as I said, it's always a semi-close fixture, and I kind of like Manchester United's chances. I feel like we could see a surprise here or there. Once again, Arsenal have been perfect, 5 out of 5 wins in a row, and it is very, very likely that they could continue. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for my Premier League Match Week 6 predictions. I hope that you guys did end up enjoying. Once again, we are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so I would appreciate it if you did subscribe down below. Along with that, can you hit the like button and get this video to 20 likes? 1 like for every team in the Premier League. I would really appreciate it. But of course, guys, I'll see you next time. This has been Finn, FYNN. Cheers.